starting out the vlog with a banger. Frederick, you're doing something beautiful with this book. The mental health representation was on point. I'm like, is this lady on drugs herself? I am really just enjoying getting to know Eleanor. I'm like, let me find out. I'm gonna have the DNF. Why would you say that to her, Felix? I know how to dissect some deep reading, but this? Hi friends, welcome to part 2 of my TBR Takedown, which is a series that I have started for this year to read the books on my physical TBR. The very first book that we will be reading is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. The second book we will be reading is Sula by Toni Morrison. Love her. So this next book, I just wasn't in the mood to read a romance at this time, so I swapped out Checkmate and I added in Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, so I can't wait to get to that one. The next one is Beartown by Frederick Backman. And then I added this book in because I felt like it was a great book to read during this vlog. And it is my year of rest and relaxation. It is by Ottessa Moshfegh. So these are the books that we will be reading in today's video. I am actually going to start with Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. It's just time for me to read a Sally Rooney book. As someone who enjoys and appreciates literary fiction, now is the time. One of my all-time favorite booktubers, she really enjoyed this book. And I absolutely adore her. She can talk about a book so beautifully. Oh, the way that she can articulate her feelings and her thoughts after she reads a book and has this beautiful experience with it. I admire that. She speaks about books in such an eloquent way that even if you probably won't like the book, she can convince you to want to read it. I just love her. I do. I really do. That's my girl. I love you, girl, if you're watching. I really, really do. But anyway, I definitely want you guys to hear what she had to say about the book. She kind of gives the synopsis and she shares her thoughts and why the book has like a special place in her heart.
This is about a friendship. It's about Eileen and Alice. They are both writers to different degrees. We're watching them sort of relate with other people. We're watching them fall out of love. We're watching them fall into love. We're watching them dance in the sort of relational, you don't dance in a battlefield, but I was gonna say you watch them dance in a battlefield of what it means to like fall into relationships. You know, people are meeting on Tinder and we're reconnecting with people that we've known all our lives. And so we watch them sort of trip and fall and try to find their footing in relationships. But also we're seeing how these two friends oftentimes miscommunicate with each other and don't love each other in the way that is most receptive to them. We see them sort of realize this mismatch in frequency and try to realign that. So yeah, it's a book on friendship, it's a book on relationships, it's a book on how we relate to one another, how we connect. It's sprinkled with some email correspondence, which I love. I know a lot of people dislike that, but I love the emails. There's a lot of existential dread in it. There's a lot of like contemplating capitalism and how we survive in them, contemplating how we continue to live our lives and the mundanity of our lives in the sort of like hellscape of capitalism. And I think I was asking a lot of the questions that the characters in this book were asking. And so this book just holds such a special place in my heart. I don't know, I feel like while I was listening to it, I was suspended in time in the best sense of that phrase. And I am constantly like yearning for a return to that feeling. And so I simply reread it every year at the same time. So this is my third reread of this. I think I reread it. Honestly, there's one quote in here that talks about her being an instrument through which life passes. And that is like one of the most stunning passages. I really like that. And I just like to, it's like meeting a celebrity every time, a celebrity sighting. Fantastic. I don't think I need to talk this book up. It's had its moment and those who love it, and those who don't. I deeply love it. This book, it's just, yeah, it belongs here in my heart.
You see what I mean? Tell me you did not want to buy the book just because of what she said. Her tone, her energy, the vibe, everything is just so soft and it's so beautiful and it's like, I need to read this book, right? So I just adore her. I really do. I did go ahead and start reading, and at first it took me a second to find my footing. I'm not gonna lie, because this is very interesting writing. At first I'm like, Kat, let me find out you led me astray. I'm like, let me find out. I'm gonna have to DNF. But that literally only lasted for like maybe a chapter, not even. And then once I was able to find my footing and just get acclimated to Rooney and her writing style, I started to really enjoy the ride. And I am wildly invested to see what else she's gonna pull out of her literary bag with this one. So I have made it to page 166, which is the start of chapter 17. Rooney writes with so much ambiguity. It's very interesting and equally hilarious. There hasn't been one controversial topic that has not been touched in this book, and I just think it's so epic. She had this quote in here about pain and suffering. Presumably, remembered suffering never feels as bad as present suffering, even if it was really a lot worse. We can't remember how much worse it was because remembering is weaker than the experience. I'm like, okay, Rooney, I see you cutting up. Her sentences, her prose, and all that jazz, they hit. Alice is basically responding to an email that she received from Eileen. She's basically telling her about a conversation that she had with Felix. I feel it's not my place to judge him because I can't think why it should be, and because I'm occasionally wrecked with guilt over horrible things I've done too. My impulse was actually to forgive him, especially because he has apparently spent a long time feeling remorseful and blaming himself. But I had to recognize it wasn't my place to do that either, since the actions he described may have impacted other people's lives permanently and would never have any effect on me. That's good. That's a fantastic way to think about forgiveness. And when you enter into like a relationship or a space with other people and they start sharing things that have happened in their previous relationships, it's easier for you to forgive them because that person does show remorse because time has gone on, but you don't know the impact and the effect that it had on that other individual. So you don't really have a responsibility to forgive that person for things that happened with someone else. We are responsible for forgiving people for the things that they have done to us. That's what I gathered from it. I do want to point out that Eileen and Alice do communicate solely through email, which I do find kind of weird, and I do think that's why they have so much miscommunication that transpires in their relationship. It's very interesting. But this last quote that I want to share with you guys, it really hit me, okay? She's talking about the power of journaling, the power of writing, and the power of absorbing one's feelings. It says, at the time, I felt like I was just absorbing life, and at the end of the day, I never had to strain to think of anything good I had seen or heard. It just came to me. So this was when she was in a really good space and she was able to write, feel her feelings, jot things down so freely because they just came to her naturally. She says, even on a bad day, I would see things, completely ordinary things. And in that way, even the bad days were good because I felt them and remembered feeling them. There was something delicate about living like that, like I was an instrument and the world touched me and reverberated inside me. And I do remember Kat highlighting that quote as well, and it really is a very beautiful quote that if you sit with for a second and really think about that, it's absolutely stunning. But anyway, she goes on to say how she started to put the diary away. Eventually, I take it back out to look at the entries from previous years, and at that point, I found it impossible to imagine ever feeling again as I had apparently once felt. It wasn't just that I failed to be delighted by sensory experiences. It was that I didn't actually seem to have them anymore. Stop playing with me. I actually remember I had a session with my therapist and I told her I was sobbing when I pulled out my journal. It was actually my gratitude journal and it had like daily gratitude, my dreams and goals, and I saw the decline. I saw how I was doing it every day and they were big dreams and bright gratitude, and then it just dwindled. I'd do like 5 things a day, then it moved down to 3, 2, maybe even 1. The dreams, they just stopped, and then I had to sit with that because she also says here she tried to reflect back and see what was going on in your life. What were you feeling and experiencing at that time that it was able to affect your life experience and your writing in such a way? And I was like, oh my God, I knew exactly what it was. So much going on with my life and just getting acclimated to being a special needs parent, and then just so many other things were happening in the background, and I started to feel differently. I started to see life differently. There was even another quote. Let me see. But it's what read on a book, right? Okay, it's right here. It says, it's so hard to see the point sometimes when the things in life I think are meaningful turn out to mean nothing. Stop playing with me, Rooney. Listen. Y'all, listen. We starting out the vlog with a banger. I could see if I just close my eyes, have the foresight to believe. Time don't move backwards, it speeds to the future fearlessly, charging forward when I open my mouth, though I may not know how. Wow, that was was very impressive writing. It summons thoughts that you might never have considered, and it explores so many thematic questions that the characters struggled with surrounding friendship and relationship, while they felt like there were so many more important things going on in the world to worry about. I did feel like the characters were a bit obnoxious and annoying and kind of childish at times, but I was wildly fascinated by them. And as the story continues on, you actually get a deeper understanding that they're less annoying and they're more in a state of like depression. The mental health representation was on point. Very realistic representation of depression and self-sabotaging. I really appreciate all the themes and everything that Rooney did with this book. I am just like, dang, that was some good writing. I'm not even gonna hold you. The one thing I didn't like is that the character development, I needed more. I wanted more, but I do realize it wasn't a character-driven story. She's actually using these characters to explore and address and bring up so many other themes on capitalism and consumerism, and child, the list goes on. And so they were just there so that she could talk about bigger issues, if I'm being honest. And I'm not saying that they weren't developed. They were developed enough. That was just my own experience with it. Somebody else might have thought it was just enough, but for me, I would have liked to see more character development. I also was not the biggest fan of Felix. Man, that guy, I felt like he was toying with Alice's emotions at times. I also felt like he was very mean to her intentionally. He was very insecure a lot throughout the book. He had his own issues going on. He does get redeemed, I feel like, at the end of the book, but up until the end of the book, he's just kind of a tool. And I'm just like, you something, Felix. His character is just so funny too, though, I'm not gonna lie. So he just comes over to Alice's house this one night. I mean, he did ask first, and she's like, are you on drugs? And he's like, God, yeah. Wouldn't be much of a night out if I wasn't. And I'm just like, this guy. There's so many times where I have wrote this guy. I just think it's hilarious. So Alice is kind of annoyed, right? Because he comes over, he looks away, he's clearly drunk. He's like, so I shouldn't have texted you, really? And she's like, right, but you felt like having sex, so you text me. And he's like, well, I'm only human, but if that's all I was after, I could have gone elsewhere, couldn't I? No need to bother you just for that. Wow. Listen, this is what I mean. This guy was like really saying some things to her. He says, but you have a lot of people wanting things of you, and I just think for all the fuss they make over you, none of them actually care about you one bit. I don't know if anyone does. Why would you say that to her, Felix? I'm just like, this guy is so unhinged. He's so funny, and really he's just like your typical guy that like has a lot of issues going on that he needs to sort out himself. I definitely could see that he was struggling with insecurities because Alice is depicted as someone who's wealthy in the book, while Felix is like a warehouse worker. And so I think he wanted to feel big around her. I did have a lot more grace for him towards the end, but overall I just was not feeling the way that he was treating my girl Alice. One thing I really want to say is that I admire the friendship that Alice and Eileen have. Some friendships require a lot more effort and a lot more work than other friendships, and although there's a lot of miscommunication and hurtful things said, they still had a lot of respect for each other to some degree, and they end up having like a little falling out, which is sometimes necessary. Some friendships you do need to just stop tiptoeing around and just have the fallout, because then you guys are really able to get to the root of the problem. You guys are able to say what's really on your mind and what's really bothering you, and just start to get to a place where you can heal and hopefully move forward in a healthy way. So I do respect their friendship, and I do appreciate that they are both willing to put in the work to make sure that they can remain in a friendship. The love they had for each other was way more clear than even the love that they had for their spouses. Felix, although he was like a lot, I am not going to sit here and say that Alice was not also a lot. She definitely struggled with depression. She also came close to saying what was on her mind, but it was so many times she didn't. You are accountable and responsible for teaching other people how to treat you, how to show up for you, how to take care of you. That is something that you teach other people, because they may not know. They may try to do what they do with other people, and like, that might have worked when you were with them, but for me, I'm gonna need you to show up this way, or I'm gonna need you to do this. And so it was a lot of times where she wanted to say something, she just couldn't. I think she was just in a situation where she was willing to deal with the little bit that he was giving her, as opposed to just losing him. Yeah, yeah, I really had a lot of respect for the way that these two friends were not willing to give up on each other. I will probably read this book again, not gonna lie. I just feel like I know I missed something, or I know I overlooked something, or I glazed over something, or it didn't quite click or something like that. So I could definitely see myself rereading it, but I have to leave you guys with this review because it's my exact sentiment. It was just so funny and just so much fun. The reviewer says, the story is about 4 people in their late 20s, early 30s having, navigating, and talking about sex and relationships. Throw in some philosophical discussions and you basically have the plot of the whole book. She goes on to say, don't ask me to explain why I was so into a book where the characters nod, blink, smile faintly, stare in silence, and exchange glances multiple times on page. I have no explanation. She wraps it up by saying my favorite line, I can't be the only weirdo out there who falls for this crap. I'm like, oh my God, that's literally how I felt. I'm like, dang, I'm eating this up, but it's mad weird. It's interesting. That's the best word I keep thinking of. It's interesting, but then it's so funny because Kat said she loved it. She said it lives here in her heart, and I understand why. Her and I, we have very similar reading taste, and she's actually a literary fit girly. She loves Irish lit, translated lit, and so do not be afraid to check out her channel. But now we are going to move on to our next read, which is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, and it is by Gail Honeyman. I have had this book on my shelf now for a long time. It's time to read it. Khalilah, oh my gosh, she got me so excited to read this book. She loves it. I have similar reading taste with her as well. This airplane, I'm gonna just wait for the plane to go. But back to it. She was gushing. She was blushing. I was like, okay, I might have a real gem sitting on my bookshelf here. This might be a 5-star read. So I'm going to go ahead, let her give you the synopsis and her thoughts and her feelings on this book. And then we're going to go ahead and deep dive into this one.
This book here, I don't know why it got to me the way that it did. But this was such an incredible story for me. I think because I related to her. Not to trauma dump, but I had like a very tumultuous childhood. Therapy. But she did too, but like in a very extreme way. And just the way that she went around society, she went into the world, and how she was able to finally be vulnerable and lean on people. It was just so good to me. Now this book, maybe I should give some disclaimers. This book is very heavy, but in the lightest way. I don't know. The way that Gail Honeyman wrote this, it's kind of how some people talk about their trauma. And when I say some people, I do mean me. It was just very lighthearted and funny, but also like, no, I'm actually dying. Like I actually need assistance. It was very like that. But if you don't already know, this story is about Miss Eleanor. Eleanor, she is a single young woman. She goes to work, goes home. She's kind of like Linus in that way. She has no life. She has no social life. But she has this huge scar on her face, and it was from a fire. And you don't really get to hear much about it until throughout the book. They kind of give you little hints throughout the book about what happened to her in her childhood. And she speaks to her mom once a week, sometimes twice a week. And her mom is just really nasty, really heinous. And it's just like not a good person in her life. But she's not ready to let go of her mother. And it's kind of the only social interaction she has for a while until she meets someone at her job. And this angel here, what was his name again? Raven. He wanted nothing else from her but for her to be happy and to just be there. He was just like a silent angel. Even when she didn't want him around, he was always there, and she slowly got to open herself up and to have a genuine friend, like a friend in the truest form of the word. And that allowed her to believe in people again, to open up about what happened to her when she was a child, and to finally get the help that she needed. But basically, this book felt like if you had a traumatic childhood, at least for me personally, maybe this is why this book hit me so hard, it felt like someone was holding my hand. It felt like I forgot how to walk and someone was holding my hand. Or I was learning how to ride a bike for the first time. Oh my God, I feel like I'm gonna cry. I got to see someone a little crazier than me go through something so traumatic and deal with it. Deal with all her negative emotions, her self-loathing, her mistreatment, and for her to find the light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how much she went through. And that is why I love this girl. I love her so much. It just did something for my inner child. It did something for my inner being. I don't know. I just don't know how to explain it. But this book left such a huge impact on me. I think out of all of these, this is probably number one.
Hello and good morning, friends. I am exactly 150 pages into Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, and I am loving it. I am enjoying the ride with this very intriguing, equally hilarious, very much matter-of-fact main character. Like, she is just such a treat to go down this journey with her as she navigates so many things and just open herself up to so many things. It's so cute. It's almost like a coming of age. I think she might be 29, but it still feels very coming of age to me. She's dealt with so much trauma that we haven't fully tapped into yet at this point in the book. The relationship with her mother is extremely toxic. So if you had some things going on, some traumatic things in your childhood, or just a bad relationship with your mom, then this will probably bring those feelings up for you. But yeah, the mother is so toxic. She is so mean to Eleanor, and I'm just like, what's good with you, sis? But I'm also assuming, I don't know for sure, but the vibe she gives me, she might be having some type of like psychotic episode, or maybe she had, and she might just be like out of her mind, and so she might get a little grace for that, but I don't know. And it was so crazy too, because the mom did drop a gem, okay? And I have a note here that says, this is true, it's just weird to hear her say it because she's crazy. I very much agree with this, but in your context, I'm not sure. And it says, life is all about taking decisive action, darling. Whatever you want to do, do it. Whatever you want to take, grab it. Whatever you want to bring to an end it, and live with the consequences. I love that. I truly believe in that. It's like, listen, stop whining about stuff, complaining about stuff. Let's be about it. Do something about it, okay? But like I said, in this context with this mom, she might have meant something like very toxic and heavy, but for me, I was able to pull something different. And it's so funny because as I'm reading the book, I'm noticing that she means some of these things in a different way that pertain to her. And that's the beauty of reading. I'm able to still connect with them, not necessarily in the same way, but in my own way, and I adore that. Like this here, I've walked through fire and I lived. There are scars on my heart, and I hope some undamaged tissue remains, a patch through which love can come in and flow out. Stop playing with me. That is beautiful. That is so true. There's so much that happens to us, and we just hope that we don't become jaded or hardened heart, and that we are able to still love freely and be loved, and to just be open to so many things that going through pain and going through trauma and tragedy can close us off to. But more than anything, I am really just enjoying getting to know Eleanor. I had to do a little research because there are moments where you think she could be autistic. So I was like, I wonder, is she an autistic character? Because some moments you feel like she might be, other moments she's just unusual. She's just different. She's very particular. So I did some research. The author did say the protagonist is not autistic. However, reading is up to that person and their experience. There's so many things about her character that I absolutely love. And there was a really beautiful scene when she went over to Raymond's house and his mom was there. She created a space in which Eleanor was able to be so vulnerable. She didn't realize it. She was so overwhelmed with emotion, and I was just like, I love this for you. She said, I'd met new people, introduced myself to them, and we'd spend problem-free social time together. It is so refreshing and so healing when you have toxic-free interactions with people, and I love this for her. Listen, I think I'm about to eat this up. This was such a beautiful story and it gutted me, okay? And it challenges you to make sure that you are not suppressing memories or that you are not overlooking pain. And I'm just like, oh, this was such a good read. It's also a reminder to recognize and destroy those voices, those negative voices that sometimes arise in our head that can oftentimes lead us to destruction or lead us to depression or lead us to unhappiness. It's like you have to speak positivity. We have to think positivity. And this is such a reminder of that you have to look within yourself and actually repair some of these things that are causing you so much pain. This book was special. This main character was special. And I really appreciate how Gail Honeyman chose to tell this story. She says, I wanted to tell a story about someone like this, or rather someone who ended up like this, living a small life. A lonely person, a slightly awkward person, and someone in whom loneliness and social awkwardness had become entwined and self-perpetuating. I wanted to tell the story of how this happened to her and of what happened to her next. And this became the story of Eleanor Oliphant. The book was actually very funny. Although it's extremely heavy and painful to read certain things, the book was still very funny because Eleanor was really funny. She wasn't even trying to be funny. That's the best part. She has no filter and she's just oblivious to like all the social conventions that we have going on. And I loved her for it. It actually made the plot so much more hilarious. So our main character, Eleanor, is actually dealing with depression. And she didn't even realize that she was dealing with depression until she gets help, until her friends and people around her bring this up to her. Like, you're not okay. Like, it's normal for people to just be sad, but as sad as you get, as low as you get, this is not normal. This is not okay. You are not fine. You need to get help. So she had this massive revelation and it was absolutely beautiful. She just felt like if something happened to me, no one would care. And I absolutely love that Raymond was able to dispel that myth for her. She says, it was surprising that he should bother with me, especially given the unpleasant circumstance in which he found me after the concert. He elected to look after me. He didn't call anyone else. There must be some people from whom difficult behavior wasn't a reason to end their relationship with you if they liked you. Then it seemed they were prepared to maintain contact, even if you were sad or upset or behaving in very challenging ways. This was something of a revelation. Gail Honeyman, stop playing with me. Literally, it brought me to tears because I was just like, oh, she needed Raymond. She needed to get so low so that she could work through these things and have these big, massive revelations and learn what unconditional love was. She says, I wonder if that's what it would be like in a family, that they'd be there if you needed them, no matter how bad things got. Oh. When I say it was so beautiful, when I say it touched my heart, listen, this is good. Really, really good. But I do need a little break, okay? That was heavy. That was a lot. This is definitely one of those books that you need to sit with for a few days. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit with this and ponder on which one of the books we are going to get to next.
But I'm blessed. Didn't know it'd take me past my destiny.
I did go ahead and take a few days to just sit with Eleanor Oliphant. Is completely fine. I even read a different book and then I was like, okay, which one of these do I want to go ahead and read next? Because we are definitely saving Sula for last. I went ahead and decided to read My Year of Rest and Relaxation only because I feel like I'm gonna like Beartown a little bit more. It's not giving me energy like I need to read this right now. It wasn't until Karla Espinosa, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name, she listed this book as one of her top 10 for 2023 and I was shocked. She does not normally read books like this and I was so shocked, like, oh my god, if she liked it, maybe I have a little gem sitting there on my bookshelf. She described it in a way that, I don't know, it got me a little intrigued. It got me a little more excited and interested in this particular character and how she's going to navigate this year of rest and relaxation. So I want her to go ahead and give you guys the synopsis and her thoughts on why she listed this as now one of her favorite books of all time.
The story is about this girl that's like 26, 27 years old living in New York City. Both of her parents passed away and she inherited all of their money. So she's kind of like pretty wealthy, but she doesn't have any family, and she's at a point in her life where she's questioning everything. Like she's at a really low point. This girl pretty much feels like she has everything she needs to be happy and be living a happy life. She just can't figure out why she can't let herself be happy. And she basically makes the decision, and here's where it gets a little weird, where she wants to fall asleep for an entire year. She decides that she's going to be taking all of these pills, like endless amount of pills every single day, to keep herself asleep, because in her mind she thinks that when she wakes up after that year she's going to be like a different person. Like it's basically like a life reset. So the story takes you through that year with her, where she's going in and out of consciousness, all the things that she's doing. So I feel like the only thing you really do have to know about the story is that it can feel kind of repetitive, but I don't know why that is something I actually found comfort in. Like, I don't know, I just really enjoyed this story. The ending of this book is one of my favorite endings in any book I've ever read. I like audibly gasped when I read it. It's just a really good deep story, but it's told in such a simple way that you don't even realize the depth of what you're reading. I just loved this book so freaking much, and this definitely became one of my favorite books of all time.
You look so beautiful. Take your glove off. Now push your button. Good job. Good job. I finished my year of rest and relaxation. I was laughing so much, hollering, laughing, cackling. Like, this is one of those books where you will audibly laugh, not just smile or laugh in your head. No, there are some very hilarious moments, and this is actually a very fascinating concept to write about. I was very invested and very interested to know, how was this going to end? Then after a while, I'm like, what is the point of this story? Where are we going with this, Miss Moshfegh? Essentially, we are following a rich white woman who is indulging in her privilege, basically deciding to hibernate for a year under the influence, which is absolutely preposterous, but that is basically what this book is about. And as we see her take all these pills and sleep for a year, we also get to see her reflect back on reasons and things that led up to her wanting to do this. Her psychiatrist is the absolute worst. I was flabbergasted. This lady was just prescribing her pill after pill after pill, never really ushering our main character, who is nameless. I don't know her name. She is an unnamed, protagonist. And so she never ushers her to do the work internally. They never do anything to get to the bottom of why she needs these pills, why she's even seeking therapy and counsel. And I was just flabbergasted. Like, this psychiatrist is ridiculous and she needs to be in jail. And she just lacked empathy. I'm like, is this lady on drugs herself? Our main character had to tell this lady that her parents died at least 4 times, and I was just like, if she has to tell this lady one more time that her parents died, I am going to snap. I love that the book explores side effects of drugs. These drugs are prescribed to people and they actually do work when they are used properly, but the way that our main character was using them, I was just like, whoa. I'm not gonna lie, Ottessa Moshfegh, she did write this book beautifully. I do like her writing style. However, I just didn't love and fully enjoy this story. Libby ended up having it available, and I was so happy because at times it does get boring. So the audiobook really did help me to stay immersed in the story. It is narrated by Julia Whelan. Anytime that Julia Whelan or Brittany Presley are the narrators, you know it's about to be a good time. But overall, there were still so many strikes as to why I could not give this 5 stars. Like, there was one part that she's like, oh, maybe I got AIDS from one of the black guys at the gym. She made a lot of different comments about Asian women. She also referred to an autistic child as retarded, and I'm just like, this lady is a hot mess. She clearly was written to be a character that is not likable. I'm just like, this level of ignorance is way too annoying for me, and so I couldn't give this book a 5 star. And I kept thinking, like, what is the point? What is the point of this book? And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna pull a point from it. I'm not gonna invest all these hours and all this time into reading this book and not pull anything from it. So one of the biggest things that I did take away from this book, you can have everything. She was loaded, okay? Lots lots of money. Like I said, this is a privilege. I would love a year of rest and relaxation, not under the influence and on drugs, just a year to chill. Who doesn't want a year to chill? Like, if bills are still paid. And it was just crazy how she was able to get away with this. And I think for a portion of time, she was still going to work. It was so weird. I'm like, nobody at work noticed she was kind of like stoned out. The two biggest things that I did pull and take away is that sometimes alienation does heal for some people. Not in this way. Do not get it twisted. Don't let me ever find out that any of you tried this method. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is not the way to do it. But sometimes you do need to alienate yourself, drown out the noise and other people and their voices and their problems, and just really focus on what it is that you're experiencing. Allow yourself to feel and allow yourself to grapple with thoughts that you've buried down so deeply. Just don't alienate in this way. And the biggest takeaway was how our main character gets to fall back in love with her life. And I think that's such a beautiful representation. Sometimes, just as we think we can't fall in love with our life because there's just so many insurmountable problems and all this trauma and all this chaos and just whatever, and you just feel like there's no way that I can love this life again, this is a reminder that you can. So I'm guessing that that was the point, because for a while there, I'm like, why did you write this book? This is like, where's the trash can? No, but it wasn't trash. However, the overall rating on Goodreads is actually like a 3.6, and I do think that's a very valid rating for this particular book. It's definitely just like a strong 3. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Now we are going to move on to Beartown, and I am very excited to get to this one. I did try and look on HBO to see if the show was still there. It isn't, which actually sucks. However, we do have a Fire Stick, and so my husband was able to find it on there. So I'm gonna start reading this, see if I like it. If I am enjoying it, then I'm gonna go ahead and watch the show. Lexi over at Newly Nova, let me tell you, she is a good time. She talks so fast, she's so energetic, she loves reading just as much as I do, and you can just feel her excitement and her energy when she talks about books. And the way that she gushed and raved about this book, I was like, I will not let winter in, and I have not read this book. So I'm gonna go ahead and let her gas this book up, because I promise you, once you listen to this clip, if you've never heard about this book, if you've never thought about it, if this is a situation like me where you had it on the shelf but you were just like, nah, I'll get to it when I get to it, more than likely after hearing her talk about this book, you are going to want to pick it up.
I honestly can't tell you why how good this book was just shook me to my absolute core as much as it did. Like, the chokehold that this book had on me when I was reading it, unparalleled. For weeks afterwards, I was changed as a person. I love Frederick. I want this nice Swedish man to adopt me. I want to live in his town. I want to bake him warm gingerbread cookies. I want to study under him and learn whatever sorcery he is capable of putting into pages like these that don't even end up in their original language. Like, this is a book that's in translation. I can't even imagine what it would be like to read this in Swedish. This book is about a small town in the woods in Sweden, and the only thing that anybody cares about in this town is high school hockey. Now, did I know even a single thing about hockey going into this book? No, I did not. Don't let that stop you. It's like Haikyuu. Like, you don't have to know anything about the sport. You're still gonna care by the end about how they do. But anyways, back to the plot. For many, many years, Beartown's ice hockey team has just been garbage. Like, really bad. But when this book is taking place, for the first time in a long time, they finally have the chance again, it seems, to take back the high school crown, which, in addition to just giving everybody something to be proud of, could also make a massive, tangible economic difference in the town when it comes to state investment. So it's a big deal. But as this tournament is going on, something awful happens that basically splits the town in two and forces everybody inside of it to reckon with their own morality and complicity, and really just like what they value most in the world and how much they're willing to hurt each other in the name of those values. It is a banger. Like, this book is told through multiple perspectives that comprise what feels like everybody in the town. There are so many different characters that all feel fleshed out and interconnected into like this breathing whole. Even when sometimes those characters don't have names, like, they still feel like authentic living people. It's such an achievement. I was a puddle on the ground when I finished this book. I think about it all of the time. It just feels like something that I will return to when like my frontal lobe is done developing and I'm like 30 and living in a real adult community surrounded by neighbors and acquaintances. This just feels like the kind of book that I will return to during each new era of my life. In my opinion, this would work as a standalone. It has a pretty completed story, but it's also a part of a series. This one is just 10 out of 10, 12 out of 10. I recommend it with everything I have as a human being on this planet. It's so good.
Baby, let's get into Beartown because we need to talk about it. Chapter 1 of this book is one of the most saddening, gripping, most intense starts to a book that I have ever experienced. It's very intense, okay? So far in this book, it's a lot of getting introduced to the characters and the coach and the GM. There are a lot of characters. I can tell some of them are just like a background character, or they will be of some importance at some point in the book. I'm only 52 pages in. And right now, I'm really vibing with like just learning more about hockey. It's not a sport that I actually follow. I'm definitely more of a basketball and football girl. Hockey, it's just so violent and it's so rough. I've just never been all that interested in it. Hockey is so important to these individuals. It says hockey hurts. It demands human sacrifice physically and mentally and emotionally. It breaks feet and tears ligaments and forces you to get out of bed before dawn. It eats up all your time and it swallows all of your energy. There's another part here that says, why does anyone care about hockey? And the answer is because it tells a story. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is so cool. I don't know why, but I just think I'm gonna really like this. Like, you know how you just already know before you even get to a book, you're like, I know I'm gonna like this. And usually about 50, 60 pages in, I know if I'm gonna at least give a book like 3 or 4 stars. Maybe when we get to 100, I'm like, I might even be knocking on a 5-star door. I'm not saying that about this book. It's not giving me 5-star energy at this time. What I am saying is that I am having a good time and I am intrigued enough that I will go ahead and watch the show with this. We need to talk about Frederick and how deep he is getting with this book. I completely and totally underestimated this book, and I don't know why. I guess because I was assuming a teenage hockey team with the boys. I don't know. I just felt like it might read a little YA. Baby, this is not reading YA. Frederick is diving into so many human emotions and human feelings and human experiences. I am just totally in awe of his writing style. He has decided to tell this story in such a delicate but insightful way that I am just a huge fan of his writing now, and I will continue on the series. I do obviously need to see how this book ends. I am 200 pages in, but the way it's going, the way this man can pull on your heartstrings, the way that he can relate to so many different readers while experiencing this ride with these characters, it's mind-blowing. It's so freaking good. These lines will be able to help you understand exactly what this man is doing in this book more than I can articulate to you. So it says, all adults have days when we feel completely drained, when we no longer know quite what we spend so much time fighting for, when reality and everyday worries overwhelm us and we wonder how much longer we're going to be able to carry on. The wonderful thing is that we can all live through far more days like that without breaking than we think. The terrible thing is that we never know exactly how many. These next 2 that I'm gonna read are specifically for parents or moms. Like, he gets us. I would be shocked if he wasn't a dad. He has to be a dad the way that he's writing about parenthood. So this first one, it says, not a second has passed since she had children without her feeling like a bad mother. For everything, for not understanding, for being impatient, for not knowing everything, not making better packed lunches, for still wanting more out of life than just being a mother. It goes on to say, her work may be demanding and tough, but it's straightforward and it's logical. And being a parent is never like that. If she does everything right at work, things usually go as planned, but it doesn't matter if she does absolutely everything in the universe correctly as a mother. The very worst can still happen. The way I felt so seen in that, I'm like, whew, all right, Frederick, I see you cutting up. This one really sums up parenting for you. It says, being a parent makes you feel like a blanket that's always too small. No matter how hard you try to cover everyone, there's always someone who's freezing. Oh my God. I felt so seen. Moms, dads, we're seen. We are seen here. Frederick gets it. I even relate because obviously they're playing hockey, but I am a basketball mom. My daughter played basketball well, she's still playing basketball at the college level, but she started when she was in middle school. And so we get just as involved in these sports as these kids do. And so I can even relate in that aspect to the parents and how invested their kids are in this game of hockey. Frederick even points out here, the children's hobbies aren't only the children's hobbies. The parents put just as many hours into them year after year, sacrificing so much, paying out such huge amounts of money that their significance eats its way even into adult brains. They start to symbolize other things, compensating for or reinforcing the parents' own failures. Frederick, you're doing something beautiful with this book. He really and truly is. But this particular part, this is going to hit for anyone who has dealt with grief or anyone who has dealt with any form of a tragedy, which I truly believe is all of us. And it says, we always remember more sharply than anything else the last happy moment before everything fell apart, the second before the crash, the ice cream at the gas station just before the accident, the last swim on holiday before we came home and received the diagnosis. Our memories always force us back to those very best moments, night after night, prompting the question, could I have done anything differently? If only I'd known what was going to happen, could I have stopped it? Everyone has 1,000 wishes before a tragedy, but just one wish after. Frederick. Frederick. I see why people were cutting up, crying. I see why they're saying it's gut-wrenching. Like this guy said, this is masterful writing. This, I completely underestimated, and I am... Listen. Big hair, don't care. I had to like wash my hair and dry it yesterday, and I just did not feel like flat ironing my hair, and so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just let it be for today. I want to go ahead and read you guys my Goodreads review because I just think it's the easiest way to basically sum up my thoughts on this masterpiece here. Wow, Frederick Bachman is a great storyteller. His ability to tap into human emotions was very impressive. One second I wanted to fight, and the next second I was fighting back tears. It was impossible not to have empathy for the characters experiencing rage, grief, and heartache. The book starts off with a bit of a slow burn, primarily because we're getting introduced to a bunch of characters and their role in the town. You don't have to be a huge hockey fan to appreciate the book. Bachman makes it easy to follow along and fall in love with the sport just as much as the people of Beartown. This is one of those books that was equally devastating as it was insightful. There were just as many gut-wrenching moments as there were passages that gave me a deeper perspective. This book challenges you to reflect on your values, friendships, and most importantly, your integrity. The ending is why I couldn't give the book 5 stars. It just wasn't enough redemption for me. Although I was able to appreciate the ending, it's not the ending we are led to believe that we get throughout the book. I also felt as if the last few chapters were packed with unnecessary context since the book is a part of a series. So I do feel like part 2 and part 3, they may have some level of redundancy at some point. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It's loaded with lots of wisdom and human experience. It's a very strong 4-star read. It was super cool to read this book in March because the book does take place in March, and it just says that I'm really looking forward to watching the TV series, which I really am. This was really, really good. It really was just the ending that I couldn't give it a 5-star. And even just like so many characters, a lot of them were in the background for a while. Then it was like towards the end, the characters that were in the background started to come to the light a little bit, maybe as foreshadowing for the next book. And I'm just like, leave them in the back. We'll get to them in a minute, dang. But Frederick and his writing style, it's so good. There's so many takeaways. Believe me. One of the biggest ones that I would like to highlight is here. This part like really hit me. It was actually the first time that I allowed a tear to fall. There's so many times where you are brought to tears. This was the very first time that I allowed myself to just have that release, and I was like, oh my God, this is so sad, and it's so true. It says here, she knew she would survive this. Even then, she knew that her mom and dad wouldn't. Parents don't heal. What an uncomfortable, terrible source of shame it is for the world that the victim is so often the one left with the most empathy. She could see in her parents' eyes how the story made the same terrible sentence echo through them over and over again. The one every mom and every dad deep down most fear having to admit. We can't protect our children. Listen, I was like done. I was so done because I was like, oh no, this is so true. We do everything to protect our children, and no matter what we do, they live in this world and they have to go through so much. And it was just a reminder, a sad, sad reminder that we can't protect our children all the time and from everything. And I was just like, dang, Frederick. Moving on to Sula by Miss Toni Morrison. I am about 50 pages into this book, and Toni Morrison demands your attention. Her writing style, it is so beautiful. It is so bold. It is so cinematic. A lot of people miss how cinematic her writing style is, and it was so cool because Kat actually noticed as well. And I was was like, that's why she's my girl. It is a little intimidating, I'm not gonna lie. It does challenge you as a reader, but what reader of literary fiction and contemporary fiction doesn't want to be challenged? So for me, I'm eating it up. At one point, I was like, okay, do I have enough intelligence to process everything that she is trying to teach us and convey? I'm like, I don't know if I can absorb what you're dishing out. This feels like the first sweep of the kitchen floor, right? Like you just get up all the big stuff. That's how this feels. Or your first time at Disney World. You're just there and you're just happy to be there. Like, oh, I'm here at Disney World. You're just looking around. You're so excited. You're getting used to all the snacks and rides. That is what this experience feels like so far. It also feels like it's going over my head at the same time. It's like, I know how to dissect some deep reading, but this? I'm like, what? I echo Kat's sentiment that the book demands a reread. There is so much to dissect, and the book is only 174 pages. Girl, what? The writing is that powerful in under 200 pages? Stop playing with her. Is such a great responsibility. It really is. A lot of times we go into it with good intentions, but selfish reasons. I was just like, okay, wow. I thought it was very interesting why this particular individual shares why he wants a wife. He needed some of his appetites filled, some posture of adulthood recognized, but mostly he wanted someone to care about his hurt, to care very deeply, deep enough to hold him, deep enough to rock him, deep enough to ask how you feel. You all right? You want some coffee? And in return, he would shelter her, love her, grow old with her. Without that someone, he was a waiter hanging around in the kitchen like a woman, which that's kind of rude, but anyway. He goes on to say, with her, he was head of a household, pinned to an unsatisfactory job of necessity. The two of them together would make one of him. That's powerful for so many different reasons. He's talking about what he's going to be to her and, you know, how he's going to be the head of household and what he can give her. But his main reason is what he needed. Oh, that's so good. And I'm just like, we don't fully understand the magnitude of what it means to be someone's husband or what it means to be someone's wife. Hi, Lil. And now a word from the wonderful woman that inspired me to read this.
Miss Sula by Toni Morrison. Something I always say is that reading Toni Morrison, the first read of her is simply like surveying the terrain. You're just looking around to see, get a feel of everything. And I always say that she doesn't just suggest a reread, she demands it. I definitely felt that with Sula. So essentially, this is a story of two friends, Nell and Sula. Nell, I think, is very domesticated and conformed, and Sula is very of her own accord. She is a woman who responds to her whims and does what she wants. So it's interesting to see these two sort of like opposite personalities befriend each other and move through the world. I remember the first time I read this, I don't think I understood fully the magnitude of what she does in this book. I reread it and it went from being a book that I felt kind of ambivalent about to being a new favorite. I will say this, Sula and Nell walked so that Lenu and Lila could run. And that's all I'll say. It's a beautiful look at female friendship. It's a beautiful look at a woman who feels full within herself and pushes against all of these societal attempts at conforming and meeting particular benchmarks. It's dangerous to be sort of this free, that the thing that shows love is having responsibility for others, and Sula is sort of an extreme iteration of someone who is just very led by their whims.
Oh my gosh, it's a date day with Sonny.
Yes, date day.
We're going to see a play. Oh, it's a musical.
Little Women.
Yes, and then we're gonna have lunch. Yay.
She will not be defiled. Keep away from me. No! I can't! Not with my flat nose!
She may have inherited a great deal of money. She could be an heiress.
she sent me in to go ask how long the wait was, right? It was like 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
And I was like, oh, well, that's fine. I called my mom and I was like, it's okay, we can wait, okay? So she's like, is there room for us to come in? And I'm like, yes, there is.
Wow.
So I go sit down, I wait. The lady comes
The
over.
longest
You can
story
be sad.
ever.
I can be sad.
And now he has all this social anxiety.
So I'm walking over, shivering. And here comes Miss Slade. I'm like, where were you? She was looking for a parking spot.
Our parking spot is so far in the back. I was just trying to move up closer.
It took way
It was like 3 minutes.
But I was so scared.
The wait was 10. It was 3 minutes.
Well, they lied to us.
My bad.
And this is why, I don't know.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Is it so good?
Never that serious for 838 pages? What's it? What tea is up in this book? Like, I don't understand. Nothing good. I'm confused.
You don't know.
I had so much fun with Mikey this weekend. We love plays and musicals. We have this little mother-son date. We'll try to do it like once a quarter, and we always do it whenever his school is having a play. And I just thought it was so cute that they were doing the Broadway musical for Little Women. And I actually never read that book. I've heard about it, but I just never, I don't know. I never had the urge to pick it up and read it. And after seeing the musical, it's like, how can you not? It's such a beautiful story. The book is like over 500 pages, almost 600 pages. And so I was like, you know what? I need to read this book. So yes, I did order it. Mikey was like, Mom, are you looking the book up while the play is going on? I'm like, yeah. So right at intermission, I looked the book up. I ordered it. It came. It's so beautiful. Isn't she? Look at the gold edges. Oh my God. It's beautiful. Look at this. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. Wow, and it says that this book was first published in 1868. And then this particular copy, it says, was published in 2023. So this is a very old story and a very old book, and it's still being respected and adored to this day. This is a classic that I cannot wait to get to. Also, excuse my voice. So husband actually tested positive for COVID, so he's quarantined to the office, which is why the last few clips I have not been in the office. But do you hear me? Oh my God. I had to make myself some tea. I am definitely starting to get sick. I'm hoping it's just because of the weather changes or my allergies. Oh, fingers crossed that I am not getting COVID. Like, I just can't deal with that. But anyway, let us talk about Sula, because I did finish the book. I finished it days ago. Toni Morrison and her writing style. It's so beautiful. And it's so many more words and so much context that could have gone in the book. But because she nailed it and told the story in such a cinematic, artistic kind of way, you just got it. Certain context, I'm not gonna lie, I did need, but then there were other moments where it was like, you just get it. Here's an example of what I mean, where there were just moments where it was like, girl, you could have simplified this. She's talking about love. She says, it was a love that like a pan of syrup kept too long on the stove, had cooked out, leaving only its odor and a hard, sweet sludge impossible to scrape off. Like, girl, what? Clearly I got it, but I had to like, you know, reread it and dissect. Like, okay, syrup is sticky, and then she means this by this. And it's like, listen, sometimes you don't want to read something that is so complex that you have to do so much thinking and use so much brain power. So you really do need to be in the mood for something like that if you are going to read this book. Then there were other moments where you just got it. Like this particular line, she's talking about like a choice that someone made, and they made this choice, she says, because it was a determination not to let the eye see what the heart could not hold. Beautiful, stunning. There's so much romanticizing of words and scenes in this book. It's just a true art in literary form. It was such a different experience, unlike any other book that I have ever read, and I can honestly say that I greatly appreciate that. This is definitely a book that could get assigned for students to read in high school or college even, you know, that way you have like a whole whole semester or a month or two where you can just dissect the language and what's being discussed and get to the deeper meaning of things, I could definitely see this being like a good book to assign for like group discussions or even like a book club. The main focal point was about female friendships, but there's also just themes about self-identity and marriage, and it was just so good. So good. She has such a profound vernacular. I also would like to talk about a few things that are highlighted in the book that are super cool. So one of them is the emphasis to be a mother. So someone tells Sula, you need to have some babies. It'll settle you. And I have written here like, whoa, that just drives me crazy. Like that society has such an expectation for people to become a mother, and it's actually a very intense journey. It's not a journey that is for everyone. Everyone is not called to motherhood. Some people don't want to be a mother, and I absolutely respect and understand people who do and people who don't. I completely agree that motherhood does have benefits. It does humble you and you do learn things from it, but I don't feel like you need to be a mother in order to feel grounded. When this particular individual says you need to have some babies, it'll settle you, she says, I don't want to make somebody else. I want to make myself. That's powerful, because when you are a mother, you have an obligation to mold these individuals, teach these individuals, protect these individuals, care for these individuals, provide for them. Like, you are everything to them. Like, it's so crazy. That can be very stressful. That is a massive responsibility, to be the sole person responsible for someone else. That's wild. Like, these are my people. These are my responsibility. Like, I have to take care of them. I have to instill these values and all this stuff in them to make sure that they turn out okay. And so I love that she's like, listen, I don't want to make anyone else. I need to make myself. I want to make myself. And it was a very powerful line coming from Sula, because Sula is a hot mess. Okay, she's a very different individual, and at the beginning of the book we get to know her mother, and I knew because her mother was out there. Okay, I was like, there's gonna be a direct correlation, there's gonna be a massive influence here with how her mother behaves and how her mother moves, and it's going to affect Sula. Like, I just knew there was gonna be some residue, some level of influence that shaped who Sula ended up becoming, and it did. I did not like Sula. I did not like her as an adult. I loved her as a child. I felt like she was very resilient, and she was growing up around so much dysfunction, and she was really doing her best. And that same thing applies to her as an adult. And even though I didn't like her as a person, I understood her. I understood and I respected what she represents in the story. It says, with her grandmother's arrogance and her mother's self-indulgence, and with a twist that was all her own imagination, she lived out her days exploring her own thoughts and emotions, giving them full rein, feeling no obligation to please anybody unless their pleasure pleased her. As willing to feel pain as to give pain, to feel pleasure as to give pleasure. Hers was an experimental life. She had no center, no speck around which to grow. She was completely free of ambition. She had no ego. And I was just like, wow, this is so true. She was reckless. You can't live that free and not expect consequences. And so one thing I did love about this book, baby, and if you read the book, please don't feel like I'm just this disturbed individual. But I loved the redemption. I loved the redemption. Oh, I loved it. And it's like, what does that say about me? Sure, some people hated it, but I thought it was great. That was good. That was a good redemption. And I will admit, you know, forgiveness is something that I've always struggled with. I am so much better now with like prayer and just practice and just an increase in grace and compassion. I have become a person that is a lot more forgiving, but because that is something that I will struggle with sometimes, I do like revenge. I like karma. And so that's why I said I really did appreciate the redemption in this book. It made me extremely pleased as the reader. I was like, yeah, thank you for this level of redemption. And it came out of nowhere. Like, I didn't even see it coming. It wasn't like we really needed it to be this extreme, but I liked it. Whether a person likes her books or her writing style, you have to appreciate good art when you see it. I wouldn't recommend this book to everyone. This is definitely a book for a particular type of individual who likes to be challenged when reading. I don't want to be this challenged every single time I read. However, I did enjoy it. I really did. I appreciate it, and I loved seeing this story because we've seen this story so many times before. I love seeing it told in a very unique way, and I'm not going to forget this experience with this particular book. So overall, clearly, I really enjoyed the book. I'm just so happy that I am knocking all these books off my physical TBR. I know this was a very long video. I've already started editing, but I'm pretty sure this video is going to be about or just over an hour. Like, girl, what? This is probably one of those ones that you can just put on and like get other chores done. Just have me keep you company and give you all the gems and the knowledge and all that jazz. So I hope that you guys had fun. I hope that you got some good book recommendations. Let me know in the comments if you have any similar thoughts or if you've read any of these books and had the same experience, a different experience. Do not forget to prioritize self-care, especially with this weather and COVID going back around. Oh my gosh. Love you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Oh, I don't want to say that. That sounds mean.
If I mess up on this again, I swear. Okay.
I don't know why I have this pillow. It just feels so cozy. Wait, let me start over. See all these words? My son's always like, I just think it's so funny how you're just sitting there on the floor just chatting about books. I'm like, I know, right?
You were lollygagging.
I was not lollygagging.
At the end of her nail session, Lily's like, oh, would you like a loyalty card so you can come back? She's like, no, I won't be back. I can do the same thing at home. I need to come back at this again with like a magnifying glass and excuse the PJs. See what Miss Tony is all about. And yes, I feel like you have to address her as Miss Tony. It was a sleepless night. So it's a 2 cup of coffee kind of day and a still wearing your PJs at noon kind of day. Or Miss Morrison, because put some respect on her name. I do believe that this was a very simple story told in a very complex way. This book will not be for everyone, I'm telling you. So I've had this book for a while now. Clearly it is very old and very beat up. And then it was one time she saw Raymond and she's like, I actually bought the book used. He arrived wearing a sweatshirt with a hood on it and I was hollering. I think I said Rooney was like an ambiguous writer. This was very ambiguous. I'm all out of breath. Oh my God, let me catch my breath.